Welcome to the November 19th meeting of the Rotary Club of Louisville. Kevin Lynch, President of the club. Please send your phones. I do the invitation today is Marcus Phone Consultant. Marcus.
Thank you. Hallo meine lieben rotarischen Freunde. I'm happy to be back up here with some German touch to our club again. And recently I actually spent some time back in Germany and wanted to tell you about a children's book I found. It's called Der Struwwelpeter, and I can guarantee you that every German knows about that book. I remember my dad reading me from it. Stories like about Conrad, who was a little boy who couldn't stop sucking on his stump, and therefore was then cut off by a tailor. I showed this book to my wife, who was really confused about it and couldn't imagine the weird tales we Germans tell to our kids. On the flip side though, I still have a hard time to understanding Dr. Seuss and the feel of that. But I love these weird little German stories, and that made me think of something. Isn't it amazing how different each of our parts is, and how things that might seem strange from the outside can have a lot of meaning for a person? And so as we come together today, let us be thankful for all the unique stories people carry with them. Let us listen with an open heart, appreciate our differences, and find inspiration in each other's experiences. And on top of that, let us be thankful that we live in a time where the most amazing stories and journeys are available for everybody to read. We can look inside the life of outstanding people and draw inspiration from their actions. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you.
Is Johnson door done?
Yes.
Fix it.
I'm not ready.
Now she goes. Helen Green's going to lead us in the pledge before that she's a realty advantage.
All right. Rotarians, the flag. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And now the four-way test.
Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned?
Thanks. Thanks, Jonathan. Now it's time to introduce your guests. I go back to the blankets. And as guests, as your name is called, just stand. And when you introduce your guests, please state your name first and the name, title, and organization of the guest. Thank you.
President Kevin, Henry Kaiser, fellow Rotarians, I'm pleased to introduce my guest, Steve Bass. Steve is well known, and I hope to say hello if you don't know him, but I think the world of him because he's so involved in every wonderful project thing happening in Louisville. Steve Bass. Oh, he's already done that.
Hello, Rotarians. Stephen George, CEO of Louisville Public Media. Here with me today is my colleague John McLean from LBM. Hello, Rotarians. Kent Whalen with Whalen Ventures. With me today is my colleague Krista Yockey with Core Real Estate Services, and she's also the founder and president of the local chapter of Peru Commercial Real Estate Women. Thank you.
Hello everybody, my name is Courtney Evans with Jewish Family and Career Services. My guest today is Gotham Name. He's the Research and Development Manager and Computer Vision Engineer at Fortnite. Hello, I'm Michelle Black-White, the Executive Director of the Brightside Foundation. My guest today is Gina O'Brien, who is the Director of Advancement for JCTC. She serves on the Brightside Foundation Board of Directors and is the past director of the city side of Brightside.
Hello everyone, my name is Dee Chuan, CEO of Louisville Institute of Technology. I got a young guest named Sam Hayden. He is a realtor, a rising star in the real estate business. Listen to me, because of his mindset, he is here purely to learn.
My name is Rick Harnett, longtime member of the club. I thought I had two guests here today, but my wife Mary Ellen seems to have stolen one. Yep. Longtime friends, Pat Harrigan and her husband, Chris.
I'm Linda Bartram, and I'm your Interact Chair, and the gentleman sitting down is the Vice Chair, and over at that far table, Tony Newsbury, who's our Secretary of our committee, and I brought interactors. So, from Western High School, Mika Powell, our advisor, and the two interactors, please stand. This is Autumn Etherton and Nathan Pennington, who are our President and Vice President of Western High School Interact. And then from Iroquois High School, our advisor, James Gibson, and 21st Century Program Wyatt Livers, who's been instrumental in keeping that program going. Thank you for being here. And last but not least, Delene Taylor, Executive Director of the club. I have a couple of guests to introduce today. First is Tanya York, who is the founder and owner of York Management, an event planning company. Welcome, Tanya. Is Michael Garten here? Did Michael make it? Okay. Michelle Young is the RN Program Coordinator with Health Careers Training Institute. Welcome, Michelle. And Dr. John Ratliff is also my guest today. He is a data analytics and health policy professional and looking for the next great adventure. So if you know of opportunities in those fields, please connect with him. And we also have a special guest from the Kentucky Opera who's going to be introduced in a minute. And Kevin, are you going to introduce your guest as well?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, everybody.
I was a little confused there for a second because when I looked at the line, Delene was not on the line. How could she not be on the line when we're introducing guests? It's been corrected. We've got a few guests. She's Anna Jazarowski with DQS Solution and Staffing. She's Business Development Manager. And Jay Bruce Miller, coincidentally of the Jay Bruce Miller Law Group, he's speaking to us in a couple of weeks. And Callie Russell, the Director of Government Affairs for Humana. And as you all remember, 2 days from now, it's Veterans Day. We'll be celebrating Veterans Day. And we're honored to have somebody from Kentucky Opera actually sing the national anthem for us. So I want to welcome Susanna, Bill, and Nick Kness to sing the national anthem to us.
At
That was fantastic. I'm glad nobody else volunteered to sing after that. Some of us are going to the U of L football game tonight. Don't expect that, okay? Hate to let you know. Today we're also going to honor our armed services veterans. We're going to play an armed service melody. And as you sing along if you like, and as your branch song is playing, please feel free to stand up.
Feel free to join me, please. From the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli, we fight our country's battles in air, on land and sea. First to fight for right and freedom, and to keep our honor free. We are proud to claim the title of United States Marine. The Army, we're here on the hills, we keep the trusty tail and the big song. And the big songs go rolling along. And high, high, in the field delivery, shout joyful song. For the know you will always know that the big songs go rolling along. Air Force. Right in the sun, here they come, shipping to meet our thunder, and boys give it on. Down we dive, our flame from under, off with one and the roar. We live in fame, go down in fame, 'cause none can stop the USA war. We're always ready for the call. We place our trust in thee. Through howling gale and the shot and the shell, to win our victory. Semper Paratus our guide, and victor motto too. We're always ready, do or die. I, Coast Guard, we fight for you. And also the Elmer. Merchant Marines, our King is here leading us. It's a long, long way to go. It's a long, long way. Ashes full, fade away.
Joel, Kentucky's great. Louisville's great for all the major arts in Louisville. One of them is the opera. I think we've all, learned maybe we have to go out to see the opera pretty soon. Pretty impressive. And I want to thank all the people who served our country in the services. I also want to thank Susanna for singing in the Kentucky Opera. That was great. To Robert Lee, who recorded the melody, and to Barbara Collins, Barbara Lynn Jameson, and our Music and Arts Committee, who actually organized the whole thing today, so I appreciate that. I'd like to welcome the public to podium Dr. Linda Bartram Moore. She's chair of the Interact Committee, vice chair of the Rotary Honor Scholar, but she's also PHS +3. But she's actually just a wonderful person who's involved in everything and really cares about the kids, and she really helps them out. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. President. So, Rick Harnett and Tony Newberry and I would like to give certificates of appreciation to the following people, from Iroquois High School to Wybett Livers, who certainly facilitates the existence, to James Gibson, who is our Interact Advisor at Iroquois High School, James, and Mika Powell, who is our Interact Advisor at Western High School. And also up here you see the President and Vice President of Interact. Autumn Etherton is our President, and Nathan Pennington is our Vice President. So if we can all get scooched together for a photo series.
Okay, teacher, here we go.
Thank you for your support of our youth.
I want to thank and congratulate all of them. Thanks to all the Rotarians who helped make that kind of thing happen. It's very, very impressive what we do for youth in this community. I'd like to welcome to the podium now Mike Cowell, and I can go on for hours. I think you want that, but I'll give you some of his highlights. He's club president years ago, one of the best darn presidents ever. His past district governor, co-chair of the District Rotary Foundation Committee. He's a Lifetime Service Award honoree, Major Donor Level 2, and Vice Chair of the Rotary Foundation Committee, to name just a few. So, Mike?
Thanks, President Kevin. I would like to invite David Dick to join me up here at the podium. David is Director of Tax Services at Dean Gordon Allen Ford. Service backed up with financial investment is a vital part of our work. November is Rotary Foundation Month, and we will be highlighting 3 of our members who have achieved major donor status. The Rotary Foundation has the highest possible score from Charity Navigator for its strong financial health and commitment to accountability and transparency, and is in the top 1% of charities evaluated. Since it was founded more than 100 years ago, the Rotary Foundation has spent more than $4 billion on life-changing sustainable projects. The Rotary Foundation transforms your gifts into service projects that change lives, both close to home through district grants and around the world through global grants. Our club has participated in both many times over. Major donor recognition is given to Rotarians whose cumulative donations to the Rotary Foundation total $10,000. Please join me today in recognizing and celebrating David for his generous investment in the Rotary Foundation as a major donor.
I do want to mention that there's a beautiful engraved crystal award waiting for him in my car that I forgot to bring in. So if you can hang around for a second afterwards for the photo op. Thank you.
Thank you all. I certainly never expected to get any kind of reward for just giving away some money, but anyway, it's great to be up here. And I think they like to put people up here like me just to encourage everybody to give. But the fact is, I think the Rotary foundation, both the Rotary Club and, am I too close or too far? Hello? I like our own Rotary Club and the Rotary Foundation simply because, number one, they have incredibly low overhead. That's because it's staffed by so many volunteers, incredibly efficient. And the other thing is that all the things that they seem to support all make really good sense to me. There are a lot of charities I don't care for. They all have some sort of axe to grind. Rotary Foundation does not. It is simply there to get as many people involved in helping people around the world. So anyway, that's the reason I give, and thank you for the award.
Thank you, David, for your ongoing investment in the work of Rotary. I want to remind our members that our goal of every Rotarian Every Year program is for each of us to contribute $100 or more annually to the Rotary Foundation in order to maintain our status as a star club. You can do so right now by scanning the QR code on the screen. It is simple as paying for today's meal was. Thank you.
Thanks, David and Mike. Think of all the people around the world you guys have affected over the years. That money makes a huge difference. And those who weren't here last week, the Gates Foundation, according to Bill Gates, searched the whole world for the best foundation in the world in terms of how they use the money for impact and sustainability. In the whole world, they picked Rotary Foundation as the best. So that's something to be proud of. Before I invite David, Guthrie up here. I'm actually going to clear up one thing before we get to the next speaker. There's some confusion. It says David A. Jones on the book, okay? There's been a lot of reference to David A. Jones Sr. Okay, why is that? Well, the reason is for years that guy was named David A. Jones. And then several decades later, when David A. Jones Jr. started doing these amazing things in Louisville, everybody says, well, David Jones is this, which one? So his father had to change his name just so to figure out who's doing what. And Principal at Guthrie Mays Public Relations, Dan Harledge, come on up and tell the rest of the story about David.
I'm sure I can top that. Yeah, I'm not sure I can top that. That's a great point, Kevin. But I will just sort of set the stage a little bit about what David Jones Jr., what brings him here today, and put into context what Kevin was talking about. In 1961, David Jones Sr. and another young lawyer borrowed $1,000 each to build a nursing home. And that modest investment turned into Humana, which grew first into the largest nursing home company in the country, then the largest hospital corporation in the country. And today, it's one of the nation's largest health insurance and integrated care companies. His just-released autobiography is entitled David A. Jones, Always Moving Forward. It depicts his profound impact on the American health care system, as well as his lifelong love of Louisville, his hometown. And although Mr. Jones drafted the memoir before falling ill, he was not able to finalize his work, and he asked his eldest son, David Jones Jr., to edit the book and get it publicized. So today, David will share the experience of working on his father's autobiography. David has a long history with Humana and Louisville in his own right. In 1993, when Humana exited the industry-leading hospital business and reinvented itself as an insurer, David joined the Humana board, serving until the spring of 2023, and he served as the chair from 2005 to 2010, and today he chairs the board of the Humana Foundation. Also in 1993, recognizing that entrepreneurs between the coasts are often overlooked by national financiers, David co-founded Chrysalis Ventures here in Louisville. At Chrysalis, David partners with young companies in healthcare, education, telecommunications, and location-based entertainment, to name a few. So please welcome David Jones, Jr.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Kevin, for those very nice introductions, and thank you, Rotary, for having me here today. Give me the right distance from the mic. The mic's a little tough right now. Is this about okay? Thank you. And if I get too close, and if I'm too far away, let's not be shy. So let me just start by saying this, I hate it that my dad's not here, because Susanna singing Anchors Away, along with all the other pieces, and Marcus invoking Strumpelpeter would have been really, really happy things for my dad to hear and participate in. So I'm grateful that you guys are interested in learning about the book. I know that a few of you have already read it. Many of you may have it, and I hope many more of you are going to get it and read it. So what I'm going to try to do in my approximately 20 minutes is not kind of front run the book, walk you through it, give it a review, but talk a little bit about how it came to be. It's kind of weird. I mean, Kevin did a nice job of connecting dots, as did Dan, but I'm not the author of the book. I'm the editor and the project manager and the annoying nerd who helped get it sort of across the finish line. And I want to tell a little bit of that story. I'm going to try to make it a little more personal. There are a lot of friends in here. There are a lot of people who were along the journey and knew my parents long. Some probably in the room knew them before I did. It would not surprise me. But I'm going to try to make it a little more personal by saying, what did I learn from getting so close to my dad's words and his voice? And then if time permits, I'll pick out a couple stories from the book that I find particularly fun or interesting. So before I do that, though, let me call out several people from the audience. First of all, I want to recognize Bob Hill, who is here with us. Bob was my dad's co-writer. And I would just say, if everyone in the room had already read the book, that would have been a standing ovation, because I hear my father's voice. I hear my dad's voice in the words of the book, and Bob is a beautiful writer who helped that come into being. I also want to recognize John Clark of Old Stone Press, the publisher of the book. John, you can stand up too. There you go. Everybody knows John. This was a Louisville production in a lot of ways, just as Humana was, and really both of my parents' lives were. So that's really important. I also want to just mention Steve Bass is here with us. It is true that the two founders who went on to manage the company each put up $1,000, but 3 other people put up $1,000, including Steve's dad, Sonny Bass. The book is a Louisville story in so many ways. All right, let me talk about how this book came to be. And I guess it starts with the idea that my dad talked for a while about writing a book sometime in the 2000s. So when he was working on the parklands, he was out of Humana, and he was thinking about, he had some time. He always loved to write. He wrote a lot of op-eds. He wrote a lot of letters. He wrote a lot of thank you notes, but also a lot of stern suggestions to people that might help them get motivated to do things. But he liked to write. He didn't really get going on it, though, until he reached out and partnered up with Bob Hill in the early to mid-aughts, sometime around 2014, 2015. Bob says that they really got going in 2016. And the process for getting the raw material together was Dad and Bob talked and talked and talked. Dad identified initially about 20 people for Bob to go interview, try to get different people's memories. That turned into a list of 40, a few more than 40 who were interviewed, and then more and more conversation. And I was not close to that part of the book at all, but I was close enough to know that those conversations turned into really wonderful dialogue and story sharing. My dad liked to talk, he liked to tell stories, so does Bob. They had many similarities in growing up, big families, athletic sons, Irish moms who were insistent on education. So the process of the creation, I think, for my dad of the book had a lot of joy in it. It was memory, there surely was some nostalgia, but the process was just really fun. And, that took Bob to the point of helping my dad put together an organizational structure and a draft, which they finished in 2018. They circulated it to 4 or 5 people, of whom I was one. They got some feedback, and some of the feedback was, I would say, pretty material in terms of what's missing, what's maybe redundant. A lot of it was, tweaking. And I don't know exactly what happened, but my dad took it back, and in early 2019, printed out a second draft of the book. It's got 200 printed pages front and back. And he had that with him in his briefcase when he went to the doctor on April 3rd of 2019, because his back was hurting. He was admitted to the hospital for some testing, and the tests revealed he had multiple myeloma, which is a blood-borne cancer that manifested initially in his vertebra. It became very painful, and this is not a medical disquisition, but the point was he was planning on, he was working on this book, but he was never able to pick it up again over the next 6 months. He had it with him when he passed in Nazareth's rehab center over beside Bellarmine, and he asked me, excuse me a little bit, but he asked me if I could see to it that it got published. It needed editing, it needed an agent, a publisher. Who knew? I'd never done this before. But it took about a year after Dad and Mom passed. They passed within a month of each other. And it took about a year to pick it back up. I think during that period, Bob probably despaired that his work would ever see the light of day because I was so hapless in getting my act together. But once we picked it back up, Bob and I, another wonderful part of the team, Jill Keeney, who joined me as an editor. Jill is a very skilled editor, and she was in my parents' book club. She'd been a Courier Journal member of the editorial team. She worked for Humana, in the public relations, so she knew the context and the landscape and was a great partner. But we worked it, and we finally got going, and boom, 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 we banged it out, got it going. There are wonderful Louisvillians who have a lot of experience in publishing books and writing books. So, David Novak, Emily Bing, Matthew Barson. These were all people who I reached out to and talked about what the heck do you do with the book. I ended up talking to some agents, some commercial publishers, and eventually, found my way to somebody who would help me finish the job that I was tasked with, which was publish a book, which is a memoir, not a business book, not a story of how you can be great like me, but a story for friends and family and the people who were along in the journey. I think the commercial publishers, their general reaction was, there's a great book in it. If you cut out about half of it, got rid of all these extraneous people, it would be great. That wasn't the task, and that I think we still have a great book. But we did find our way to John Clark, to a wonderful designer, Julia Comer, who happens to be from Romania, and Humana's relationship with Romania was a very big part of this book, and that was a really special thing. So anyway, we got it done, and I'm thrilled with the result, and I'm very grateful that we were able to do this kind of in the spirit of one of my favorite things I ever heard my dad do, which was give a commencement address to my brother Matt's high school class. And there were a couple things that were funny about it. First of all, the adults were all out here and the students were in the choir loft right behind him. So he turned his back on everybody and they spoke for 2 minutes. And he said, 2 messages for you students. First of all, you've got a great education, but you're nowhere near done. Get out of here, go somewhere else and learn. And the second is, come back to Louisville. Anything you can do in the world, you can do in Louisville, Kentucky. And we hope you'll come back. So I think the way we did this book reflects a little bit of that spirit. All right, so I'm going to move on from the mechanics. I hope they're a little bit interesting to everybody else. I certainly learned a lot about how books come into being from it. But I also learned a lot from a very special thing that I got to do. I think it's pretty rare for for a kid who has been along for a lot of the journey. And from the time I came back to Louisville at the end of '92, Humana was in a big mess at that point, and it really was restarting. But Dad and I worked often closely together, sometimes side by side. Sometimes I was on the board and he was the CEO, and he was reporting to the board, and that was kind of weird. Plus, he was hard to control sometimes. Anyway, but it was a special thing, and there were several things that I drew out from maybe 2.5 extra years of having my father's voice in my head after he passed from editing this book. The first was, and I knew all the facts, but I never put it together. But my dad's resilience was a critical part of this. He lost each one of his best male friends, his 4 best male friends, very, very early along the way. His best friend from U of L, Carrie Thompson, died when they were both in their early 30s of leukemia with small children. Terrible blow. I was 4 years old. I still remember a little bit. He lost his brother Logan, who really was kind of the glue of the family in a way, when in the early 80s, so Logan would have been late 40s, and of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. He lost his best friend from law school, Alan Duffy, also leukemia, in their mid-50s, and then he lost Wendell Cherry, a terrible blow, his best friend and his co-founder and partner. Without either one of those two, there's no Humana, there's no Art Center, there's no lots of things in Louisville. So, and he had other things that were bumpy. I mean, his youngest son, my brother Matt, was very badly wounded in the first Gulf War. And the book tells the story of 2 Marines in full dress blues showing up at 2 a.m., ringing the doorbell. And, nobody knew at that point in our family that the Marines come no matter what, not just when somebody's dead, but when they have news, you get the news. But that was rough. His mom lost her leg in a fall. She broke her hip in 1968. Right at the time when Humana had just gone public for the first time ever, anybody in that family had 2 nickels to rub together. And he sent her and a sister on a round-the-world trip to visit her brother, who was a missionary in Malaysia. And when we got to London, she fell, broke her leg, had to have her leg amputated. And again, and I'm saying, what did I learn from the book? I mean, I never put it all together because, my dad's life was not a life of suffering or of, constantly looking back and, being sad. My relationship with my grandmother, who never walked again by herself, was not one of sadness. This was a resilient guy and a resilient family in a lot of ways. And for I think for everybody who is trying to think, what do we learn? I think, one of the speakers said we should learn from, examples. I mean, that resilience is something that I learned from living with it in my head for such a long time. The courage to stop doing things is another important element. Humana grew, but they were the biggest nursing home company, and then they got out of the nursing home business completely. They were neck and neck, sometimes the biggest, sometimes number 2 in hospitals. And then they got out of hospitals. You know, I think if he were still around, the question would be, what is next after health insurance, which is definitely, you know, mature and will give way onto something else. So that was the courage to stop doing stuff was important. You know, one of the things he says in the book was, companies get hardening of the arteries just like people do. Companies get complacent. And I think one of his great traits was he never got complacent. And it wasn't that he kept perfecting one thing. It was that he dropped things, went on from it, and did the next thing. The next thing was gratitude. I think he was probably better at saying thank you to people than anybody I've ever known or worked with. And of course, as his child, one of his kids, I didn't appreciate that. You know, growing up, I didn't appreciate it until later, until I saw how he worked with, how he was with people when he was in the hospital, and when I heard the stories of people who were with Humana or with the other things he did growing up. But he was really good at saying thank you. He loved to hand things off to people, to give people huge challenges. He wasn't slow to hold people accountable. He wasn't slow to fire people. He wasn't slow to move on when things where people got outgrown. But he was really good at saying thank you, and that's another thing. There were a bunch of things in the book, things that I already knew, I already understood. He was incredibly competitive. I mean, just the stories heavily sports focused, but his relationships with really important people in his life, like Buster Coleman, the great civil rights activist here in Louisville, started on the basketball court at the YMCA. They pounded on each other in lunchtime pickup games and became friends because they were both super competitive, and neither one of them could jump. They had a special style of backing up. Anyway, he was also incredibly quick to make a decision. They talk about, he tells the story of how he and Wendell decided to do what turned out to be starting Humana. That's a pretty well-known story, but Dad talked to a guy he knew at Male High School, a couple years older, who had bought the biggest home in Louisville, most expensive home in Louisville, from a departing executive. And Dad said, I knew you when you were at Male High School. You didn't have any money. How did you do this? And the guy said, well, Dave, I built a nursing home. So he ran back to the law firm and said, Wendell, we got to build a nursing home. And they consulted their experience, which was that each of them had a grandmother who had moved into the nursing homes of the day, which were really other houses in the community with no qualified staff, just people taking care of people, but they were not happy places, and they thought this could be done better. And this was before Medicare, Medicaid, any federal money came into the area. So the speed to make decisions. Dad got a great education in Louisville Public Schools, in Jefferson County Public Schools. He had an unbelievable math mind, but he credited it to his, I think, 5th grade teacher who taught him the rule of nines and made him, do all kinds of calculations in his head because otherwise he was rambunctious in class and she needed to keep him busy. But that math mind was super helpful, but the education that he got in Louisville's public schools was critically important. And I think the one unfinished task he felt like he left behind without really making much progress on was getting our public schools to serve more of Louisville students, in the way that he had been served as a poor kid from West Louisville. So, what else? I don't know. I mean, a lot of people have commented on his ability to focus. Senator McConnell, that was his comment to the media. My dad drummed into him the importance of focus. I don't know whether my dad would be happy or not. Probably we're divided in the room on whether Senator McConnell's ability to focus on the Supreme Court was, good or bad. But it certainly was a kind of a echo of the sermons that my dad gave. So that's kind of what I took away from the book, without going more personal than I really want to be. I think I've got a couple minutes, and then I'm going to look to the audience for questions. So what I'd like to do is just pull out a couple of stories that are in the book to hopefully whet your appetite to go read it. I'm just going to mention the Little Red Wagon that Bob Hill really identified in some ways as a symbol. You will find it externally on the book if you take the scavenger hunt challenge and go looking. But the Little Red Wagon was what my dad and his brother, they would pull a wagon to the Parkland Library every Saturday or every other Saturday, take back the books from the house and fill it up again with new books. Eventually he was number 2 of 6 kids. So they had 8 library cards in the family, and they would max them out frequently, and everybody had to read. Everybody had to go to school, and everybody had to go to church. That was like it as far as rules. But Bob tells that story quite beautifully in his introduction. The story of opening the first nursing home is quite funny, I think, partly because the person who was going to manage it sort of had a nervous breakdown the night before they opened it. So my mom and Wendell Cherry's first wife ended up cooking meals for a short while, and my dad, and I can't imagine this being true, but apparently Wendell also helped assemble the beds the night before it finally opened. That's kind of fun. One thing, I don't know if anybody in here remembers, but sometime in the 60s, Dad and Wendell were off somewhere or other. They were flying on a Beechcraft Bonanza out of Bowman Field, the little plane, single-engine plane with the V tail, and their pilot, longtime Humana board member John Landrum from Harrodsburg. John got paid in stock, which was a good thing, over time. But it took off, and for some reason the plane didn't have enough power. They got about 30 feet up, and John had to bang it back down on the runway because there's a cliff at the end of one of the Bowman Field runways that they were on. And the plane was pretty mangled. Everybody was okay. And they jumped out, ran over, and released another plane, and flew on to their meeting. And to anybody in the room who is building a company or an organization or whatever, some days are like that. You just gotta go on with the show. But I guess the opera singers too, you gotta go on with the show, right? But that was a pretty good one. The Kentucky Colonels, I know Bruce Miller's gonna talk to you in a couple weeks. He might mention the NBA, but I'm not gonna read about the ABA background, that goes way back. That's very, very fun. The split of the hospital business out of the insurance business, I've always had the impression that most people in Louisville didn't really understand what was going on or what happened. The hospitals that was a great business. It was also really large. About 80% of the revenues of the company and 120% of the profits of the company. So the insurance business was losing money at the time that they separated. And there really was a restart of Humana. It wasn't a flat startup. The insurance business was 6 or 7 years old, but it was always an appendage. It was only there to fill the hospitals. It wasn't a separate business. And some people, maybe the business professors and business community might get something out of the restart there that I don't ever feel like we've completely understood. And then the building of the Parklands, just to bring it to the present day, that is a treasure. That I think is the thing that my dad was proudest of, that he did, because it'll have the longest life. It'll go on for, hopefully, as long as the Olmsted Parks go on. So that's another really fun and interesting story. So I am biased but I think this is a really wonderful book. Bob Hill helped kind of bottle up the special sauce of my dad's voice, his way of speaking, his storytelling, and it's also, it's a great Louisville story. It's a great American story, you know, rags to riches, you know, nobody to influence. Those are all really good, but I'm going to close my part by just saying another thing that I think my dad would be really happy about is these stories are still going on. You know, the great American stories are still going on. Was anybody here at the J-Town opening ceremony for the Trion Monument to the Vietnam War soldiers? So Young Wing, one of the two founders of a company called Atlas, came to Louisville as a refugee from Vietnam. And he had a great story. He found a partner. The two of them always reminded me a little bit of my dad and Wendell. Mike Davis was, Mike never met a stranger. He was a little bit like my dad. You know, he could talk, he could sell, he can. Young was very, very, very focused, like Wendell was, really, really focused. Great technical skills, great creativity, great writing. And the two of them built our first digital unicorn. And it wasn't a fly-by-night, you know, poof company. It took them 30 odd years to build it, but it employs 800 people here now, and it created the means for Jung to have his kind of public coming out party. And it reminded me very much of, in my head, of the opening of the Arts Center back in the 80s, which, you know, Dad, Wendell, the whole universe of Humana people had a good bit to do with. Lots of other Louisvillians involved, lots of other people in the Trion thing. So I just, you know, I think, you know, just like the beautiful singing and global Louisville bringing Strumpelpeter into our, you know, our discussion, that would be a happy story. And I want to end my remarks there, but also now invite questions, comments, anything else. We've got about 6 or 7 minutes, I think, if you want. Yeah.
That was fantastic and unexpected. Why don't you go back to where the mic is for your questions?
Hey, David.
Hi.
Hey. First of all, thank you for being a dutiful son and finishing the job. It's a great gift to this community and the larger community as well. Your father and mother were well known for their philanthropy. Having researched your family history in the process of writing this book, where did that come from?
It's a good question, and let me also say, I hate it that I didn't talk more about my mom. You know, the book talks a fair amount about my mom, but you know, it's my dad's book, and they were quite persistent in each telling their own story. You know, my mom, you know, when her youngest kid was in 7th grade, told Dad, "You're going to now have summer duty. I'm going back to grad school," and she went off and got her master's. So I think the philanthropy came from their upbringing. I mean, they both were, well, Dad was definitely raised in the Baptist church. Mom was raised in the Baptist church, but went to youth group in the Methodist church because it was more fun. You know, but I think my dad's parents tithed all the way through. My parents tithed until tithing was not enough. And I think they just, they understood how fortunate they were. You know, I think there were a lot of elements to it, but they had more than they needed, and they wanted to share it out. I think it's pretty much that simple. And one of the real interesting things in kind of not just the book, but dealing with their estate was I have no idea about all the money they gave away. I mean, a lot of it just went for, I think they paid for college for a lot of people, a lot of kids. They did stuff, and we actually, I thought we were pretty well organized. We had this foundation that we worked together on, and we had meetings, and they were good at, trying to teach. They also they did a lot of stuff together, but it wasn't any of their kids' business either. So.
Judy Haymaker, is there any one lesson or a lesson that stands out that you think that your dad taught you that is so important that's carried you in your life?
Well, I'd say there are two that I think a lot about how often I have ignored them. One was the importance of focus, and my business has been venture capital, where the thing I love about it is I get to learn about so many different things, and I kind of have my fingers in a lot of pots. And I've tried and tried and tried to convince myself that that is a type of focus, but I never have. So I guess my takeaway there is, he's right, but there's more than one good way to be. And the other thing is just action. Action changes the world. On all of these problems that, we're working on, or opportunities that, we all have opportunities, we all have problems. He was a good thinker, he was a big reader, but, he always acted immediately. He thought pausing to ponder too long was itself a form of action, and it would never work.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Stelene Taylor, Executive Director. So now that you are an expert editor, publisher, all the things, shall we look for a David A. Jones Jr. book?
So I don't know about a book. I think, John, maybe you should leave quickly, lest anyone corner you and get details about how it really was to get across the finish line. It's like everything else with the deadline, it gets a little hairy toward the end. But the one thing that I would say, if I could wave a wand and have the story better understood, a lot of our national dialogue and even global dialogue is about hot spots. The Silicon Valley, Boston, the places where, great people congregate and great things happen. I saw that, I lived in China out of college. I had a different part of my life that was kind of a China hand, and same thing in China. It was like, if you're not in Beijing or Shanghai, you're just a schlub from the country, and you can't possibly accomplish anything. And that's just crazy. I mean, there are great things happening all over everywhere, and again, if I could wave a wand, I would probably try to tell the story of some more entrepreneurs from the heartland, because over time, the rate of return on Humana stock has been quite competitive with almost anything, certainly anything that has survived as long as that company has. Some of the tech guys haven't yet made it that far, although they're quite far ahead at the moment. So, John, hey.
David, you can't get out of that question for me. I was wondering if we might get a little perspective from Bob Hill on his approach. And I think both of you all were so good working together that I think that it would be a good little way to end your conversation.
Well, I think that's great, John. Thank you. And I would just say I loved working with Bob, but I think the magic was the way that Bob and my dad worked together. So, yeah.
Can you hear me now? Journalists, by and large, like to think they survive on cheerful cynicism. There's not an ounce of cheerful cynicism in this man. Okay, once he puts his confidence in you, you were screwed. You didn't want to disappoint him. You do anything to make this book work. You realize there's no David Jones name on anything around here. Think about that. All he's done, Humana, the Center for the Arts, the parks, his name, not, he didn't want that. He said, you don't pray in public, is what he said. And best of all, through all this, we became friends. You know, I only met him once prior to doing the book. And then over the 10 or 15 interviews, we got to know each other. We had similar backgrounds. Blue collar, I was one of 5 kids, small bedroom, all that same stuff. And you don't realize that you're poor because everybody's the same boat. He was that way. He never got over that. So basically, I love working with the man. I'm so happy this book turned out so well. It's his voice in this book. I helped him write it, but it's his words. And I was very faithful to that, and it meant a lot to me. And you know, I just love the guy, period. Ended up loving him.
I want to thank both of you guys. That was really phenomenal. I'll tell you, very impressive. And also, there was a question about his mother. And by the way, the book, it's a great book. It reads like a novel. But one of the things was he always gave 100% credit to his wife. They did things together. Everything he did, his wife was involved. At one point, somebody gave credit to him solely for, I forget what the exact thing was. He was livid. So he was, you know, every time they did anything, they did it together, and he shared the credit. And that's one of the reasons, by the way, they were not only married for 65 years, but happily married for 65 years. But that was just a great presentation here. We do have one more assignment for you, David, and that's to these books here by David A. Jones. We're going to raffle, so raffle these. And disappoint everybody. Disappoint everybody except for one person. There'll be 2 actually. The last 4 digits are 9868. We're going to move over there for walls. So we're going to go. We got one more. 9837. You need a rule. You can't just say yes. Get the rule. Next week, Elaine Gravatt is speaking. She's a great lady. I knew her. She was in HR. She was phenomenal then. She's really grown the company. She's president of Gravatt & Sons Color, Dee Williamson, DW, Dee Color. I said different names. But it's been a global company. It's been on 5 continents, in production in 4 for many, many years. Most people don't even realize that. It's one of the most global companies in the city. Powerful Pebbles, which is someone to restore her life as well. So be here next week and hear another great speaker. Thanks for coming today.
If you're a guest with us today, please meet Craig Sherman over here at the What is Rotary table.